My name is Dana Isom Johnson. I work on our PR team, and I also serve as an Etsy trend expert. So what that means is that every day I'm working very closely with media, with our seller community, to really share the stories of the sellers and also share all of your unique products in hopes to get those featured in online stories, in broadcast stories, and in print. So let's get started. I'd love to hear from you guys first, and just if you could share your name, your shop, what it is that you make.
My name is Carolyn Caffelle. I own the Wishing Elephant, and I make baby bodysuits and baby costumes.
Mm-hmm. Hi, I'm Kate Kennedy from Be There in 5. Our signature product is called the Reminder Mat. So instead of a welcome mat that sees you in your home, we make products that see you on your way out and remind you of important things on your way out the door. And I've been doing this since January 2015.
Hi, I'm Mary Lynn. I own a shop called Inblue Handmade. We handcraft and handprint leather accessories. I've been on Etsy since 2008.
Thank you again. So for the first question, I'd like for all of you guys to participate in this. So when you're working with press and influencers, how do you determine which ones to target and how to go about doing that?
Yeah, I can start. I think one important thing, especially when you're first starting out, a lot of times a great way to work with influencers is a free product in exchange for a post, Instagram, blog, whatever it may be. And that's a great scenario because you don't have a lot to lose. What I like the best about that is I find people whose aesthetic that really aligns with my brand, whether it's on the Instagram Explore page, on Pinterest, because you know they take great photography, and then at the very least you'll get some great photos of your product in a different light, and I think that's a good way to vet potential influencers, is to really just see what aligns with your brand visually, and then some other things that I'm sure we'll get into when it comes to bigger publishers. That's where I start.
Great.
I would also add that I look at who my peers are collaborating with. A lot of the times that's a nice place to find new influencers to work with, and I actually kind of cyber stalk them. You know, you look at if they have a blog, you look at their followers, what are their followers interacting with? Does that line up with your brand? Really research the person before, and if you're giving out product, even though it's a small investment, you still want to make sure that it's going to be a good one.
For me, I think more recently anyway, we keep trying to kind of think outside the box in terms of who we want to feature our stuff. You know, maybe there's an aspect outside of the obvious that makes us a good fit for something. I think, you know, your story, where you started, maybe a publication from your hometown or somebody who makes the tools that you use, are really good places also to kind of look at for press.
You know, that brings up a good point. Do you guys have a different approach when you are contacting your regional publications or regional bloggers versus a national blog or a national magazine? Is there a difference, or are you doing the same tactics?
I would say basically the same tactics, unless when I'm reaching out to people, I try to personalize it in some way. So if you're in their region or you have some shared experience, I would mention that. I guess that would maybe only be the only difference for me.
Yeah, I think that one thing I've done a little differently is, instead of, you know, sending a media kit and really being outright about asking for the exposure, I send it to somebody as a gift and thank them for what they've done, or say I really admire them, which I do. But typically people really appreciate it and they'll post it anyway. And so it's kind of a way to open the door without asking for something. And I think that's worked for me in the past, in addition to just kind of offering up how I can help them too, in addition to having them post for me. Because, you know, people are busy and you want to make sure it's a mutually beneficial.
I think one of the cool things about pitching to regional press is that you kind of already have this thing in common, not just your product, but you have something relatable. Like, we're in the Southeast, so, you know, there's definitely a culture of Southern down there, and there's a way to approach it and personalize that pitch. And that's always a good thing. But I think with anybody you're pitching, you want to find something that you have in common that you think they're gonna, you know, like about you. I think they genuinely have to like you. And I think that's, you know, that's your first step.
Yeah, so it's really just about being genuine to who you are, representing your product correctly, and reaching out to the right person who you know is going to be interested in your product. Yeah, so Carolyn, I'd love to learn from you. Can you share with us a specific pitch that you sent out recently and what the angle of that pitch was?
Yeah, so I found these twin girls on my Instagram Explore feed, and they were adorable, and I knew I wanted to get them in my costumes or get something to them. And I think at that point they had 50,000 followers, so I was thinking I have to do something to kind of get their attention. And I emailed the mother who runs the account, and I offered up custom items, custom costumes, and I think I offered up 12 pieces. And it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. She came back and she was not interested in any of the custom items, but she liked my line and she asked for pieces. And so I packaged up a box for her and added a bunch of extras. I think that's another good tip. And from the time that I emailed until the time that I sent out the box, she got like 250,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah, she was featured on like BuzzFeed, and so that was huge for me, and she posted about me a couple times. And that pitch angle was, I have a friend who makes quilts, and her pitch angle was customizing quilts and having a blogger name the quilt. So I kind of borrowed her idea. We're friends, so she was cool with it. But I think having something unique and catching their eye is really important. Even though it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, it at least got their attention. So.
Yeah, I'd like to pose this to all of you guys in terms of the tools that you're using, because you talked a lot about imagery and including physical samples. Are you also using tools like lookbooks? And in the wholesale world, there's line sheets, but specifically for press, are there any other tools that you're doing? Are you creating them on your own? Are you attaching them? Could you give some insight on that?
Yeah, I actually downloaded a media kit template off of Etsy as a digital download, and I think a lot of times the hard part is the layout and just getting the overall feel to look professional. And there were spots for all of my photos, and that was really helpful for me just because I didn't have that before, and there's no harm in attaching additional data. I think it helps legitimize what you're doing, where you've already been featured, the traffic you've gotten, what your popular SKUs are, because you can't put all that in an email, no one will read it. So it's just a great way to condense information. So I think the media kits for appropriate larger outlets are really effective.
Yeah, Marilyn, how about you?
I agree. I mean, we're in a unique position where we make leather books. So we'll actually put together a book sometimes, and that works out really well. I mean, but we have a really rustic kind of aesthetic. I think that it looks crafty, and that's generally our approach. So that works out for us really well. But I think it's just kind of deciding what you can, A, invest in, what you can afford, be it a digital lookbook or a physical lookbook, and then B, making smart decisions about where you're going to spend those resources, who that's going to. And sometimes that's trial and error, but it's always, learning experience is valuable, so.
Yeah, so Kate, like many sellers, you have a type of product that's pretty readily available in other marketplaces, so how do you make yours stand out and alluring for press?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a big learning for me. I mean, a doormat is nothing new. A welcome mat's the most ubiquitous thing in the book, and it's all about your angle. And I think when I kind of figured out how to position my products as it's not something that sees you in your home, it sees you on your way out. And it was kind of an innovation on a stale category. It then became interesting that I found a niche in a category that's otherwise uninteresting, if that makes sense. So that was kind of the angle I took. But really, you have to look closer at your story. I mean, everything is interesting. For me, too, it's people love hearing why you got started. And for me, it was because I was worried I was going to burn my house down, and I needed to turn off your curling iron before I left. And I meet so many people that share that panic. So I think those relatable stories about what made you get to where you are awesome for press, and people really like that. Because their readership wants to know you're just like them.
Right. And you have something that sets you apart from everybody else. It's not just a product. It's a story behind the product and the connection that they can make to the product as a press member or as the buyer on the other side who's flipping through the magazine or whatever it may be.
Yes, exactly.
Mary Lynn, can you talk a little bit about social media and how it's influenced your shop? What is your approach in using social media, especially when dealing with the press?
Social media has been such an incredible resource for us, and not in that we have a zillion followers, but in that our products sort of get featured on a lot of different a lot of different Instagram posts and a lot of different Facebook posts, and that's been really great. One thing that we do a lot with are guitar straps, and so for us this is kind of great because if we can get, you know, an influential musician in our guitar strap and there's a picture of them on a late night show or something, that's a really, really good kickback for us. And so we try to kind of understand what's trending in that world because we're really connected to it. But for you, that could be maybe you do bicycle accessories and you're super into bike racing or any number of things that relate to you. And I think it's important to get into that and try to put your product in places that you know it's going to get featured sort of on accident, but you know that works out in your favor. And tagging. I mean, you know, maybe it's annoying, but wow. I mean, that will make all the difference in the world.
So you actually, your product, you do a lot of music festivals, I think, right? Because of those guitar straps and other things. So how do you, I'm just thinking for someone who maybe has never done any type of press outreach before and they want to use social media as a tool, who exactly is it that they're tagging? Are they tagging a blogger? Are they tagging a musician? Are they tagging everyone?
I think, yeah, yes. You know, if, for example, this was so cool last year, the Decemberists had our strap on and they were headlining Newport Folk Festival. So that we got some great shots of that, and we have, you know, the Decemberists tagged, and then we have Newport Folk tagged, and then we have Rolling Stone tagged, and then we also have Etsy tagged, and we have just, you know, everybody that we think that relates to. So you have the musician themselves, or, you know, the person holding the item. You have the place that it's at. You have a media, some sort of outreach that you think, you know, would be a good place for that story, and then you also have where it's available. And I think if you're covering those bases, then you've got a pretty widespread.
Yeah, so we've talked quite a bit about imagery and using it via social media, using it in a media kit. Can you guys share a little bit more insight on how you approach photography? If you choose to shoot on a white background, if you're styling the photograph, and what advice can you pass along, and what's worked for you, what hasn't, and why?
So I use a variety of different approaches. I have some user-generated content that they've allowed me to use their photography if it's really great. I also pay for professional photography for modeled photos, and I do a lot of my own flat lays on white backgrounds. I would say the most important thing is just to have clear images, high quality, high resolution. Really, that's it.
Yeah, I do all of my photography, but I'm not very good at it, so I got really good at post-processing my photography instead of learning the art, because you can only do so many things. I'm in the market to go the professional route because I do think there's a lot of benefit to having clear, crisp, minimalist photos that are consistent, because as you come out with more SKUs and you have all of these different photos, it gets cluttered fast, and then you have to reshoot your entire line. So I do think the professional route's probably the way to go. But I also love using customer photos. I have in all my notes that I send out with my mats. I tell them where to tag me, I tell them to send it to me. I love collecting those because it's a great way to see how they're styled and people are excited about it. And I noticed people were taking shoe selfies and they'll take photos of their outfits before they leave. And I love that, and that's way better than anything I could style. I love seeing them in the wild, so to speak. So that's one of my favorite areas to use
That's
for
great.
photography.
So are you asking them if you can share it via social media? Are they asking to be tagged? Are you okay with tagging them if they ask that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love sharing my customers' stories, and I'll ask them first if it's okay that I share them, especially if they're private or it's a specific story. But you know, one guy proposed to his girlfriend with a "Don't forget your sparkle" mat, and she was like, "What sparkle?" And he had a ring. And I was like, that is amazing. And things like that are what make it all worth it. And I want to share with people because, yeah, it's a doormat, but it can really have meaning for when people gift it in different ways, and I love sharing that.
Yeah. How about you, Mary Lynn?
I mean, I agree 100%. I think customer photos are super in that aspect. Not only are you creating even more brand loyalty, even one customer at a time is great. Because if you tag somebody in their photo and they see it and they get excited and like, that's cool. They're probably coming back. Like, they're not going to forget your company name, and that's huge. But also, it just makes you, again, just 10 times more approachable. It makes you seem like you're connected with your audience, and that's great for press, that's great for your brand, that's great for everybody. As far as photography, I use a mix, honestly. And I've been doing this 8 years, and I have gone down several different roads, several different budgets for photography. And when we can afford it, we use a pro to do modeled shots, but I do all of my like crisp white backgrounds myself at this point.
Wow. Are you using, how do you do a setup for anyone who has not taken, those crisp white photographs? Is it like a box that's built out?
Yeah, we have a light box. I mean,
Okay.
we have small items, and that's something that's just going to vary person to person. I was just having lunch with somebody, and we were talking about how she had skirts and dresses, and I'm like, oh, that's a whole different ballgame when it comes to getting a really clear shot. So, I mean, I think you kind of have to either build your own light box or have an ideal studio situation or something in your house with the lighting. And then you need to, if it's a natural light, you need to go back at the same time every day to get that recreated, but you can do it.
Yeah. Kate, for you, can you share what's a tough lesson that you've learned along the way? Maybe that's around you being featured unexpectedly and how you dealt with that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was 2 months into my Etsy shop, I woke up one morning and my phone was blowing up. My shop had sold out. I mean, I had maybe 8 in stock at the time. I was very, very green. And I was like, what happened? And it turned out that an Australian radio station had found one of my photos on Pinterest, made it into a meme, posted it on their Facebook account, and it got over 200,000 likes in a matter of like 48 hours.
Wow.
But this was in Australia. I didn't ship to Australia at the time. I had none in stock. They were all made to order. And I was getting bombarded with some requests for something I didn't have the supply chain or even the ability to make. It was a really major fail on my part, to be honest, but I learned so much from it because I didn't really realize that what you put out there needs to be polished and ready to go because people take just as much as you reach out. And someone needs to look at your picture and intuitively search something that will lead them to your product because it will often not be credited. There was no mention of me anywhere, so it was 200,000 people being like, love this, no clue where to get it. And I was too new and I didn't have the SEO yet, so that was really hard. So that taught me to have all of my photos press ready, even in case they don't ask me. A lot of my bigger features like Glamour and HuffPost, Refinery 29, Good Housekeeping, I all found out about those because of a Google alert or my friend sent me links. So a lot of times, the bigger publications are great about linking to you, but a lot of the viral stuff you don't get credit for. And I just always make sure if someone's looking at this, like what will they type in and how can I be sure those keywords are optimized?
Right. So at this point, you guys have all clearly had major success with dealing with the press. Is it something that you're working on daily and reaching out proactively, or are you still at this point just working on reactive press?
So for me, I'm mostly reaching out through Instagram. I like finding the Instagram influencers. And that's just kind of whenever I stumble upon somebody that I'm interested in collaborating with. And press, I would say, to be 100% honest with you guys, I really don't go after press. All the press that I've had, they've found me just by being on Etsy.
They come to you.
Well,
Nice.
people look on Etsy for ideas, like bloggers and magazines, and so you guys are already, even if you're not doing any press outreach, you're on Etsy, so that's a good start.
Absolutely.
We've done both. I've gone through different phases. I've reached out, and then we've had, a lot of people contact us. We had a publicist for a while too, and that was kind of an amazing experience as far as learning from him as well on just kind of picking up tips and things like that. It kind of ebbs and flows. I don't know, after a long period of time, you see it. Like sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. So, if it's been quiet for a while, we'll throw out some pitches and push really hard. And also for us, a lot of it evolves around a new line or something like that. Like if I have something I really need to push, I don't tend to try to garner too much press when I'm in the middle of my busy season. Even before peak, I'm like, okay, I know August 1st is about the cutoff for that. So, from then on, I'm just sort of plugging through.
So that's interesting. So you don't take advantage of seasonality based on your product to reach out to press for even more coverage because you know that time is going to be kind of overtaken with making and getting ready for that particular season.
Yeah, I
I
think
save it for slower times, actually.
Yeah,
Which,
I'd
now
rather
that
have
you
it
say
then.
that, I'm like, probably should be focusing that in high season, but
Yeah, I reach out before, like I have a Halloween collection every year, and I make sure that I'm reaching out to people before that.
Yeah, because I think about how, I think about how I could potentially be bugging you guys or any of you out there or even you online because we are working in the same timelines as the editors and the influencers because we want to get things in time to them. But, you know, if that is something challenging, then we may need to rethink our strategy on, you know, some of your timelines and what works best for you. So I'd love to, at this point, open up questions to the audience and to those online, and we can just bounce back and forth.
Hello, my name is Laura. My shop name is Fashion Meme. You mentioned about your products being used by musicians. And they talked about how you went viral. And I had a couple things happen that were sort of accidental. First one was Kat Von D. She bought my leggings. Wow. And it was like, oh, cool. But how do I use this? And then they were also featured on an episode of Broad City. And that was so cool, but how do I use this? Like, I posted it on Instagram and stuff, but how can I further use this to my benefit without oversharing?
right. Yeah, that has happened to me before where I've been like, this is awesome, but there wasn't really a clear tie to me because it was accidental. I reach back out and say, thank you so much. I was so excited to see my product in X, Y, or Z. I would love to send you another one if you'd consider tagging it in the caption. I saw a lot of your comments said your readers wanted to know where to get it, and I would just want to make sure they know where they can find it. And I've had some luck putting it that way, and then it'll get a second post because a lot of TV is one thing, but with viral stuff on Instagram, it's real time is everything. So retroactively tagging it does nothing. So you really need to find a creative way to get them to do it again and then have people know in advance, I would say.
That's exactly right. I mean, I wouldn't have said anything absolutely. I mean, just reaching out and being like, hey, do you want another pair? Guess what? I mean, I think, and I think it's a great sign. And Broad City, definitely. I mean, with the TV show, it's great to just stay in contact.
The leggings were in the entire episode because they changed outfits, both the girls. One of them had to pass off as the other. So the leggings are in the entire episode, and I have all the captions, and I've posted them. But I don't want to be like, hey, I was on Broad City, and yeah, that was my big thing. Like, I don't want to overuse it,
Mm-hmm. I would say don't be shy about bragging about yourself. Put it on your shop announcement. Put it on your Facebook page. Blow it out everywhere, because people will see it and then they'll get excited about it. Snap a photo, a still of the TV show, and put it on all your social media. Don't be shy about it. That's great. You should be yelling about it.
The more people are seeing those photos, the more you put them back out there, and especially, to remember to recycle that later too. The more likely the stylist from that show is like, oh yeah, I want to get more leggings, or those were such a hit,
Right.
Yeah,
or even oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as seen on, on your website, or.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Oh.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can even add them into your listing. A lot of times I'll advise sellers if we've worked on something that they've been featured in, add it to that tag so that if someone is searching, it's easy to pop up within the search. Okay, I'll take a question from online here. This question is from Simply Palettes. Everyone is talking about online press. Is reaching out to more traditional press, i.e. newspapers, magazines, etc., a waste of time?
I don't think so. I feel like we've had some great success with bigger magazines, and initially when we were first featured in a couple, I didn't think it would change things for us, but it really did. We were featured in Southern Living magazine, and I sold 300 bags in 2 days. So, it's definitely a boom. And the cool thing about print is that a lot of people have it hanging out for a long time. It's still sitting there on your coffee table maybe, or in the waiting room, something like that. So I don't think it's necessarily a waste of time if you're finding the right magazine for you.
And I also think it hits a different customer.
Yes.
Right.
So
Totally.
Definitely not a waste.
Yeah, there's a lot of great literature out there about consumer behavior of different age groups, and I know my target's really women 18 to 34, and I have to see where they are most frequently and where I'll get the broadest reach for the least amount of money, and that's kind of what it comes down to. And I think digital is a lot more measurable, which for a smaller shop is really important to know the return you're getting on these type of things, so that's why it's my preference.
Yeah, and I think another thing to keep into consideration is timelines. So of course, when you're working with digital media, it's a much more immediate return of what the placement is going to be. When you're working with more traditional publications like magazines, they typically work on about a 3-month lead time. So you need to make sure that your product is still going to be available in another 3 months from the time that you're sending out for the initial request.
Hi, ladies. Elaine from eKnits for You. I had a question about the photography aspect. When you're saying that you do your own for like the white shots and maybe a professional photograph and mixing it up. So does that mean for each product you will have maybe one that you take yourself that's like on a white background, one that's a professional, one that's outside? So I do knitwear, so would I put one on a model, put one on a white sheet, and then have that as my 5 photos for Etsy or my Pinterest or whatever? How do you tackle that usually?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, that actually nails it.
That's a great idea.
That's what I do I bought like a white sheet and 2 stands off Amazon for like $30. I do the white shot, 1 blank background, 1 up close, 1 in a contextual environment, and those are kind of, and then maybe 1 customer photo. So I kind of have all different realms, and that's also good because it shows different lighting, and that's helped me field a lot of the questions about the color. If something looks different in different lights.
I have another one online. Thank you to Juan Pablo. How much are you willing to invest in reaching out to an influencer? Would sending a sample product of $250 be worthwhile?
Ooh.
So I've been talking about this a lot, yeah, because my product retails at like 22. So for me, it's not, I send to everyone. But I was saying if it's fine art or something that's more expensive, you really want to use those tools in vetting the people that you're sending them to, because that is a huge investment, and I would have to make some drastic changes if I was sending out a $250 item. So
yeah, I think you really have to understand who's out for a free product and who has a legitimate blog or website. And the way you can tell is you ask for metrics, you ask for their unique audience, you ask for their daily impressions, all of their social media accounts, because in the online world, exposures are the currency that drives the price of everything. So if the person asking you for a product doesn't have it together enough to know the value of their surface area on their website, then I wouldn't take them as seriously with a product at that price point. But you don't have a lot to lose with the lower price point product, because like I said, you'll get good photography, great relationships, so it depends.
Yeah. Mary Lynn, how about from you?
I agree. I think metrics are really important when it comes to that kind of high level thing. A lot of our items are, the price point is between $20 and $35, but we also make leather purses, and obviously those are higher. And we get a lot of requests from various blogs. Well, if you send me a purse, and you really have to, it's easy, especially when you're starting to try to garner that too, to be like, oh my gosh, they want to feature me, and just send the farm, Right. But you kind of live and learn on that, and I think it's really important to trust your gut and then trust the facts right in front of you and look at, is this going to be a good idea? Am I going to make sales off this? Yeah.
And also, if you're sending a big item like that, make sure that you talk terms before. Like, I want to be tagged in the photo, I want to be tagged in the comments, I want you to blog about me so you can have backlinks, like all of those things. Make sure that you say it up front and get kind of an agreement. I mean, you're still gifting, so there's no like ironclad agreement, but put everything up front, what you want from them, and then you won't be disappointed.
Yeah, I think setting expectations is completely okay. And you guys kind of talked about this, but you can either choose to say yes to everything or be selective. It's totally up to you. This is your business, and you have to make the decision on what works best for you and what the best outreach is.
My question is that before I had an Etsy shop, I used to work for a magazine, and if brands wanted to send us products to feature in our magazine, a lot of times we required them to also take out an ad. As a small business, is it worth it to take out ad space in a magazine in exchange for, the organic images, or with a blog? Because I know a lot of higher end bloggers also require, if you're going to send me something, you also have to take out an ad for so much time. Have you ever done anything like that? And do you find it to be worth it to do both sides?
I have paid bloggers in the past, and I try not to because I think that if they really love your product, they're not going to want to charge you for it. And I think there are a lot of workarounds with that. And if you're paying for placement, so I think that would kind of be the same thing as paying for advertising in a magazine and a blogger. You just have to be really sure that you're going to get a return on that investment.
Yeah, it better be a big one. I mean, I think we always try really hard to push our story and make it more of a human interest piece, an article about you, something that somebody can attach to. I think is, if you have a good story, if you've crafted your story, then people will want to talk about it, and you become an interesting story for the magazine. You are an asset, as opposed to then being, also having to purchase that ad space. So there are definitely workarounds, and sometimes it is worth it. If you have a good deal and you can get in there and negotiate and make it happen, and that that's right for you. But 9 times out of 10, if you have the right story, you can just get a really cool story written about you. And I think that actually garners more attention from the readers than an ad.
Yeah, I think I haven't done print, but with digital, if I pay for it, I make sure I have a very easy way to track conversion, and I'll do a coupon code specific to that ad, or I'll just kind of try to find a way that I can make sure everything that links back to it is from a specific source, so I really understand the return and can kind of learn from it from there. But the one thing I would definitely say, to Carolyn's point earlier, if you're paying, be so specific. Say, I want to be in the caption. I want to be in the first 130 characters before Instagram ... off. Say, I want to be tagged in the photo. I've had a lot of disappointments because the higher the click burden, the less traffic you're going to get, and it's in real time, and you can't go back and change it. So if it's paid, I would really, really have that buttoned up.
Yeah. So we've kind of touched on this just a tad bit, but I want to get to Jen on Twitter, who asked, when you've been featured, how do you go ahead and use that content? So just wondering if we could just revisit other ways for sellers to promote once the mention has gotten locked in and it's there.
Maybe if you're allowed to reuse the image, you could do like a giveaway to garner more interest, like with that image. It's hard. I think the things we touched on, that is a hard thing. Like, you're going to get the most effectiveness out of the actual event, but maybe repost it in 6 months or a year.
Yeah. On my Etsy shop header, I have a photo of a mat, and then I have as seen in, and every time it's in a new thing, I'll just pop it up there, because I think that helps other press outlets think, oh, okay, other people have written about her, maybe it's worth my time. So I'll put it in a visible place that gets a lot of traffic, in addition to my own social channels, and my sister and my parents and everyone.
That's a great idea.
Reposting it too.
Yeah, I think one thing to maybe be cautious of is, there's kind of steps that come along with when you're going to be featured, right? So you've gotten contacted by the blogger, or you've reached out and they have said to you, oh, this is a potential feature. That doesn't always mean that you are 100% guaranteed within the story. So I would absolutely hold off on sharing any of the news until you see it with your own eyes, that it's on the website, that it's on the blog, that it's on the page, because, and I'm sure the person up here who asked the question, who said that she worked in magazines, things can change at the very last minute, and that has nothing to do with you and the quality of your product. That just means that something happened behind the scenes that needed to be changed. So don't take anything personally.
Hi, my name is Molly. My shop is Rock That Gem. So last year, it was really exciting, and I had a feature in Good Housekeeping's December gift guide, which was awesome. And I knew it was coming, but all of a sudden one day they were like, great, in like the next 24 hours, we need a high-res photo of the necklace on a white background, get it to us. And I was like, great, absolutely. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I made it happen and I made it work. But it was one of those lessons of like, oh shoot, there's like certain things that those, press outlets are going to expect that I need to be able to have ahead of time. I shouldn't be scrambling with 24 hours to go. So can you talk about, I guess, sometimes when you've had to scramble, but then also like the things that when it's the slower times that we should be working on so that when people do want something, all of a sudden we're ready and we can deliver it right away?
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson to share with everybody, especially when you're starting out and things are a little slower, to plan for success and to have that stuff ready to go. High-res photos, a headshot. I would always have an elevator speech of how you position your brand in 3 sentences, make it sound interesting, and also an answer to tell me about yourself. Or, sometimes those broader questions are the hardest to answer, and you want to be able to articulate it clearly. And I do think that the scenario that you are in where you're scrambling, I feel like you kind of have to learn the hard way. Inevitably, that's going to happen to you at some point. But if you I think the most important thing is just to have your product photos. Don't worry about all of, the other stuff in you and the brand. I think that the clear product photos are probably the most important thing to start out with.
And maybe have product on hand, because there are going to be outlets that ask you to overnight something off season and you may not have it and you have to stay up till 1 a.m. making it. So if you can, and if you have an item that takes a lot longer to make, have it on hand, because you'll kick yourself if you get this opportunity and you have to say no. So.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think, I think the language actually is one thing that too we had talked about a little earlier, but that it's really important to, if you're feeling under pressure, and I get a lot of anxiety. So if Vogue's like, we're gonna do a little feature on you, I'm like, what am I gonna say? That's a lot of pressure, and then I'm nervous, and then I can't write it, and I can't, So it's always good to have examples of questions you've answered in the past. Yeah. The second you get featured once, write everything down, save it in a Google Doc, save those pictures in a Google Doc. Make sure that, or Dropbox, make sure you have a file on Dropbox that has some marketing ready photos. So even if you don't have exactly what they want right when they want it, you can give them examples. They can tell that you could have it coming to them. You might be able to buy yourself a little bit of time.
Great. Soaring Hawk Vintage wants to know, what advice for press do you have? What advice do you have for an Etsy shop that offers vintage or collectible items?
I don't think it's any different. Yeah, I think it's the same. I think that when you're a vintage seller, and I'm speaking out of turn here because I'm not a vintage seller, but you're maybe more known for like your curation. So they want to feature, if someone's going to feature you, they are featuring you because of that skill. So just keep on doing what you're doing.
Styled photos, your general aesthetic, just have someone be able to see a photo and understand your brand and your vibe. And I think that's the most important if you're already always finding pieces along those lines. That's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really fun opportunity to want to go into somebody's collection. And you could paint that picture. And I think story and stylized photos, you don't always have to have the same item on hand. Obviously you can't as a vintage seller, but you can give a cohesive picture of who you are, your brand, and your story.